So we've already talked about this, but just remember the Hartford Convention occurred in 1814. The Federalists met. They made some grievances. Some radicals in the Federalist group will even bring up a motion to start thinking about seceding. And it'll come off as very unpatriotic. They're perceived as traitors, and thus the Hartford Convention leads to the death of the Federalist Party. Okay, and here's a cartoon someone made. Okay, so they're meeting secretly. They're angry because, you know, they're all about trading with England and we're fighting England, so we can't trade with them. They wrote a list of grievances. Here's their list of grievances. Okay, and then after the Battle of New Orleans and all that kind of stuff, they're viewed as traitors. Okay, and this will lead to them to dissolve. Okay. Next, we have the American system. Okay, remember this is Henry Clay. He is Speaker of the House. His home state is Kentucky. Okay, he was a war hawk. Okay, and you'll hear all about Henry Clay. Okay, he definitely is inspired by Hamilton. Okay, again, a protective tariff. That's the tariff of 1816. And again, he was worried that you know, we're more self-sufficient now due to the Embargo Act of 1807 and the War of 1812. And now that the war's over, we'll start resuming trade with England, and he is concerned that people will start buying foreign products. And so this is a way to protect those industries that really boomed during the War of 1812. A second Bank of the United States. Congress will agree to it, establish a 20-year charter. And just so you know, technically, the Second Bank of the United States is a private bank where the government has its money. And since the government has the most, like the majority of money in it, they technically kind of own it, but it's still a private bank. Okay? And then internal improvements. That's your roads, canals, all that kind of stuff. Okay? And if you look, here is, he says that this is a government, it's the most historically significant government-sponsored program to harmonize and balance the nation's agriculture, commerce, and industry. The idea of farmers need more faster ways to ship their crops. Okay, we can promote industry with tariffs. So you see, this was a way for him to like help out all different parts of those sections of America. Okay, and again, we already talked about the tariff. Okay, and just remember, Southerners and Westerners, the farmers, tend not to like tariffs because tariffs promote industry. And so if you're a Southerner, you basically, the only way to get out of paying the tariff is to buy American, and where's the industry? Up north. Does that make sense? So I would say, like this cartoon right here, it says the funeral for free trade. When there's free trade, that means there's no tariffs, right? Okay? So this is clearly someone who's against tariffs, maybe a Southerner or Westerner. Okay? And then you have, again, the Second Bank of the United States. Okay? And there's still a debate that this bank is unconstitutional. There are some people, even in the 1800s, are like, it's not in the Constitution. It should not be allowed. Okay? All right, and then internal improvements. Just remember, his plan for internal improvements or infrastructure, same thing, is that federal money. Yes, do you have a question?
You're not presenting.
Ooh, oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so federal money. Sorry, guys. Okay, we're good now. Okay, so again, with the American system, it's not just about building roads and stuff. It's federal money to finance the roads. Okay. All right, and here is a cartoon. I am Henry Clay. I was a frontier lawyer before I became a Kentucky senator in 1810. We're both men war hawks. We want to go to war against England. We also went to Canada. I also will eventually create the Whig Party in the 1830s. Okay. I created the American system, which established a protective tariff of 1816. A second national bank, okay, which was not only owned by the government, but also by its shareholders, but technically was a private bank because you can say you owned it, the government owned it, because the majority of the money was there, but technically it was a private institution. And he wanted to provide federal subsidies, meaning the government pays for funding for infrastructure. Okay, I feel this was significant, that it was one of the most historically significant examples, okay, of government-sponsored look, using my PowerPoint. There you go. Good job. He basically, whoever did this created the same thing I just said. Just want to point out, Madison, technically, at the end of the War of 1812, he's still the president, okay? He is around, he is president with the charter of the Second Bank of the United States. He technically is the president. Remember, the election happens November of 1816. That's the election of Monroe. He still is the president until March of 1817, though, okay? And then, oh wait, no. Oh, yes, okay. And then internal improvements, just want to point out, this is the only one where he was like, oh, I don't know about this. There's something called the bonus bill that was going to spend federal money for like building these roads, okay? Madison vetoes that. He says, that should not be federal money. And he says, it doesn't say anything about federal money for national roads in the Constitution. So that's the only one that when Madison's president is like, nope, not going to happen. But it will, with Monroe, it might change. Okay? So now you have the election of that's what it is, the election of 1816 is the election of James Monroe. Remember, back then, though, you don't become inaugurated, though, until March of 1817. Okay, remember, his presidency is known as the era of good feelings. His Secretary of State was John Quincy Adams. A lot of historians believe John Quincy Adams was like the best Secretary of State. He actually was way more effective as a Secretary of State than a president. Okay. Interesting. Secretary of the Treasury, William Crawford's from Georgia, and if you ever go to like on the way to Turkey Creek Road, like where Ace Hardware is and stuff, I'm pretty sure that's like William Crawford Boulevard or something. Okay, but he's from Georgia, and then you have Secretary of War John C. Calhoun. Okay. Remember, there's that Panic of 1819. That second bus is to blame, and then all this stuff. And again, these things right here, plus the Monroe Doctrine, that's all John Quincy Adams. Okay. Okay, so we already talked about this, the Panic of 1819. This is the first, like, peacetime recession in U.S. history. Okay. And again, they were like farmers who got loans for new land. That's called speculation, when banks loan out money. Okay, and these were to Western lands. Okay. Then there's some more inflation after the War of 1812. Okay. So prices go up. That means that like maybe if you aren't making as much money, you can't afford things like your mortgage payment. And so the bank will start to tighten its credit, meaning like, oh, we loaned out too much money. Now we got to not loan out money and like bring those payments back. And if not, foreclose on people's property. Okay. And here's a little thing. First major financial crisis in the United States. Lots of foreclosures, bank failures, unemployment, okay? And causes, again, dramatic in cotton prices. So remember, farmers, okay? The contraction, meaning like we're not going to give out any loans, okay? Yeah, so a lot of people, including Andrew Jackson, will be one of those who will lose a lot because of the Panic of 1819. Okay, so the era of good feelings, we have talked about this. That is Chief Justice John Marshall. He will be president even like chapter 10, but like Andrew Jackson. He is Chief Justice for over 30 years. Okay, so and he is definitely, even though the Federalists are technically not there anymore, he is all about the nation getting power at the expense of the states losing power. Okay. McCulloch, first of all, let's go to Dartmouth versus Woodward. Again, Dartmouth is in New Hampshire. Okay, Dartmouth received a charter by King George III during colonial times. We are not America. Okay, but now that we're America, New Hampshire wants to turn the private College of Dartmouth into a public institution. Okay, Dartmouth says, no, we have a charter. Okay, and they go to the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice John Marshall sides with Dartmouth, saying that New Hampshire, and this is like governor who wanted to take it, okay, that New Hampshire cannot make Dartmouth a private institution because there is a charter that's basically a contract that's legally binding. The only way is that Dartmouth would want to be a public institution. So you see, The fact that New Hampshire lost means that it's like an anti-states case, and that's very John Marshall. Okay. Next, we have McCulloch versus Maryland. Okay. So, long story short, the Second Bank of the United States is not this one building. They have regional things, just kind of like the Federal Reserve today. Okay, like the Federal Reserve for our district is in Midtown Atlanta, but it represents a couple of states' Federal Reserve. Okay, and there's one district regional bank of the Second Bank of the United States building, in like physically in Maryland, the state of Maryland. Okay, well, income taxes are not around yet, but business taxes are. Okay, and so the state of Maryland says, hey, pay up. Your building is inside our state. And any because you make money off of interest. That's how banks make their money. Okay, you need to pay up your business tax. Okay, but the president actually of the Second Bank at this time sues Maryland, saying, no, we're not going to pay those taxes. Okay, they go to the Supreme Court. Okay, so basically the question is the Second Bank constitutional? But more importantly, can the Second Bank be taxed by a state? And again, this is John Marshall. So what's the answer? Can the state actually tax the bank? No. Okay, and there's a very famous quote. It's the power to tax is the power to destroy. Okay, let's think about it. If you can tax someone, and let's say that Maryland does not like the Second Bank. Let's just pretend that Maryland does not like the Second Bank of the United States. Couldn't they almost overtax it? And eventually, if you have no money, you are no bank. Does that make sense? Okay, and so the power to tax is the power to destroy. So again, Maryland, the state, loses. Okay, and then what John Marshall does, because he's John Marshall, he does not end it there. He goes, and by the way, I still am here in a debate about is this Bank of the United States constitutional or not. And he says, let's clear the air, end of discussion. It is constitutional through what is called the implied powers, meaning it's not explicitly stated, but it's assumed because of that necessary and proper the elastic clause. So again, stop debating, stop pitching a fit about this Bank of the United States. It is constitutional. And remember, judicial review, Supreme Court has final jurisdiction, case closed. Okay? So you see, these are both examples where the state loses or lost. Okay? Let's see if there are any blanks. Like I said, my notes are over here. You got power to destroy. So here is a cartoon. So welcome to the private Dartmouth College. I am John Wheelock, and I have asked the governor of New Hampshire to create a new board of trustees so we can become a public university. Okay? I am the Supreme Court Justice John Marshall, overseeing the Woodward versus Dartmouth. And again, it all depends on who's suing, but make sure you know it's Dartmouth versus Woodward. I concur that the charter given to Dartmouth from the King of England was between two private parties. So the state legislature of New Hampshire cannot interfere, okay? And here's the statement from New Hampshire. We have found that the contract clause applies to both private, okay? So you see, it will, long story short, it will be private, okay? Basically, there was someone involved who was trying to make it public, but again, the majority of people did not want it to be public, who were the Board of Trustees. Okay? That, I believe, is from the second block. Okay. All right, so now we have the Missouri Compromise, and I have a feeling y'all are familiar with this, even if you don't know the details, okay? Long story short, since 1791, okay, Vermont, and I forgot the other one, but Vermont and another state. It's almost like when we, when you apply, remember, for your state, you're a territory, right? And when you're a territory and you follow the rules of the Northwest Ordinance, okay, you then write a state constitution. You submit it to Congress, and then Congress will grant you statehood or deny you statehood, okay? And what's going to happen is that what tends to happen is that you usually have around two states that are approved at the same time, And one's usually a pro-slavery state and one's usually an anti-slavery state. So even since the 1790s, Congress has really tried to have like a balance, a sectional balance between pro-slavery states and anti-slavery states. Okay, and it works. And just remember, like in the Senate, y'all know it's 2 per state. So basically, that makes it really even in the Senate. So no one will get like overruled by like, you know, pro-slavery, anti-slavery people. So this works though until 1819. Okay, and I just want to point out in 1819 we're still at this 11 and 11, 11 free states, 11 slave states. Okay, Missouri has been a territory, and they definitely have slaves. Well, they apply to be a state. They apply to be a slave state. Okay, but there's no one else that has that 60,000 people to like join, and especially as a free state. So there are people who are up in arms about like, we have to have a balance in the Senate and in Congress. Okay, and there are people who are like really, really mad. Okay, and for instance, before the Missouri Compromise, there is a proposal by a guy named Mr. Talmadge in Congress. And he says, look, why don't we just clear the air and just say that, you know, we'll make an amendment to this Missouri Constitution saying, look, you will have no more slaves. Like, you can't add more, like, slavery exists in Missouri, but, like, you can't have more slaves in Missouri. And then the second part of that amendment, the Talmadge Amendment, would say once they are 25, the slaves who are already in Missouri, they are free. Do you think that passed in Congress? No. Okay? And people are still like, what do we do? What do we do? Okay? Well, who is that Speaker of the House? Who is that war hawk? Henry Clay. And he proposes the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Okay? What it did is it said, hey, look, why don't we go ahead, and Maine wants enough people. Why don't we go ahead and just grant them? They apply to be a free state, bam, 12-12 instead of 11-11. Okay? But here's what's more important, and this is like leading to the Civil War eventually because people changed the rules. Do we really need to have this awkward tension every single time a state, like a territory wants to be admitted, and it's a whole like ballots thing? No, like we don't have time for that every single time, okay? So what Henry Clay proposes is that for future states, remember, America ends the Rocky Mountains at this point, okay? He says, look, for future states, so we don't have to keep on coming up with compromises and stuff, let's have this geographical line, an invisible line, but yet geographical, at the 3630 parallel. And what it's saying is, above it, after Missouri, above it, though, slavery is not allowed. Below it, though, slavery is permitted. And then, like, that's it. Like, case closed, that's what we're going to do. And Congress will adopt this, okay? And honestly, it worked. It really settled and solved a lot of that sectionalism over slavery for about 30 years. We'll see it, like, reinvigorated in the 1850s. And the main reason is that by the 1850s, we get all this land. And it's then, okay, are we going to continue this line? Some people will be like, oh, yeah. People will be like, oh, no. And that, so again, it settles things for about 30 years. Thank you, Henry Clay. Okay, so Missouri requested statehood. Solution, Maine will be a free state. Okay, and then at the bottom is the 3630, and again, that's just through the Louisiana Purchase. And that's just fun, so we don't have to keep on doing a thing, you know. I do want to point this out, and I definitely would make sure you're paying attention, is like Andrew Jackson, for instance. He says, you know what? It works. Okay, the Missouri Compromise, that 3630 line, basically saying, look, yes, the Union will probably get dissolved one day, but like it works. Okay, this is the thing at the bottom is what you really need to pay attention to. Thomas Jefferson, you know, he's old, he's about to die. Okay, he hears about the Missouri Compromise, and he writes a letter. Okay, and he actually says, look, he says, this is all about that 3630 line. He says that it's basically like a fire belt in the night, almost like a horrible thing. A nail of the Union. Y'all know what nail means? Okay, so a knell is the Knell. It's back when people like, would die, they would like ring a bell, like so everyone would know like someone died. That's you'd call it a knell. Okay, so basically saying that this 3630 line is the death bell of the Union. And while the whole issue of slavery is hushed for the moment, we know that this is not a final sentence. And I think there are no truer words, because we know that the American Civil War will happen, and I already told you, this is good for 30 years. We're starting in the 1850s. Things are going to be crazy. So I think former President Thomas Jefferson was, so when you see this, then, Missouri Compromise. Alyssa, are we good right now with questions and stuff? Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Henry Clay, and I say we must pass this compromise. The new compromise says one slave state and one non-slave state. So again, Maine, Missouri, we're 12 and 12 now, okay? And they will repeal it later, like in the 1850s, okay? But again, 3630 will be for future states. Okay, this is someone did second block. I thought it was cool because they added stuff, like all this is like 1850s stuff that has to do with the awkwardness of the Missouri Compromise. I thought that was cool. All right, so now we're going to do the Rush-Bagot Treaty. Okay, long story short, okay, this is some foreign policy stuff. Okay, long story short, remember how I told you how the only thing that was established in the Treaty of Ghent that ends the War of 1812 was like a tie or a stalemate or an armistice, just an agreement. The status quo did not change. Okay, want to point out though that the next two treaties I'm talking about are probably things that should have been in the Treaty of Ghent, but they were just so like eager to like stop fighting that it's kind of like a continuation. Okay, so there's definitely both of these have to do with England, and there's definitely some like War of 1812 kind of stuff. So Rush-Bagot Treaty basically said, look, we want to demilitarize the Great Lakes. Okay, the Great Lakes, there were lots of, because again, think England and Canada, America and America. And the Great Lakes is kind of awkward. Is it Canada or is it America? And so there were lots of U.S. battleships and lots of Canadian battleships. And how it works, okay, think even like World War I, militarism, one big cause, long-term cause of World War I. When you build up your military, that means you're ready to use it, okay? The opposite means if you decrease your military, you're going to be more cautious of using it, okay? This is an attempt to prevent war. We're going to limit, and they actually limited to just one battleship in the Great Lakes per side. And they even made dimension rules, like, and the battleship has to be like, it has to weigh a max of this amount of tons, and all that kind of stuff. So you see, this is a way for us to be like, look, we don't want to go to war with you. We don't want some like awkward naval battle to happen, and then we have to fight you. So let's decrease that chance by demilitarizing the Great Lakes. Got it? The blank is Great Lakes. And I do want to point out, hold on. Then you have the Treaty of 1818. And basically what this did is it finally like set the boundaries between Canada and America. And that's what this part is right here. We now have the fact that both sides agreed to a border means there's no land dispute. Does that make sense? So it's like, do you see how the demilitarization of the Great Lakes and like actually establishing a formal boundary between Canada and America at the Great Lakes, that probably should have been in the Treaty of Ghent, but people were just ready to stop fighting in 1814. So tensions were high between the British and Americans on the Great Lakes. These lakes are ours, okay? America and Great Britain decided to sign a peace treaty concerning naval ships on the Great Lakes. Peace will be better, okay? And then things improved, because again, you only have one battleship, not willing to, the chances of actually fighting when you have a smaller amount of battleships really it goes down that chance, okay? Next, we have the Adams-Onis Treaty, also known as the Transcontinental Treaty. The Adams-Onis is what I would like, and again, John Quincy Adams, your Secretary of State. Okay, this is where Spain gives up Florida. That's the blank, Florida. This is where we finally get Florida. Okay, want to point out that after the War of 1812, there is a really awkward time. It's called the Seminole Wars. Okay, this is before the Adams-Onis Treaty. And this is where the Seminole Native Americans, mixed with a couple of other different people, lead raids into like Georgia and like the U.S. So the Seminoles in Florida, Spanish Florida, are like attacking us. So after the War of 1812, that's where Andrew Jackson goes, and he fights the Seminoles. Okay, and then like once there's like a lot of, basically because of that, and you see what's going to happen is Jackson, the western part of Florida, we basically control after those, Seminole Wars. Okay, this is what officially basically says, look, you've been controlling West Florida. Let's give you West Florida, America, and then the Spanish will give up East Florida. So this is where we get. Okay. Now here's the thing, though. We do pay for it. We do pay for an amount of money. Okay. So it's not like we took it from them. We just, Spain doesn't need to be in, they have other things to worry about. Okay. And so they'll cede us Florida, but we will pay for it. Now, one thing too, okay, Oregon, okay, Oregon has, it's like awkward, but Oregon is like right now it's owned by Spain, Russia, England, okay, we want in. So we basically say, look, we'll pay for you to give us Florida, but also, can you give up that claim to Oregon? Remember, it's like a joint occupation of these different countries. And Spain basically says, you can have that. You can have our part of Oregon now. Okay? That gives us all the way to the Pacific Ocean now. Okay? So yeah, Spain gave up the right to Oregon. And I would circle the word Pacific just so you know, because the Pacific Ocean touches Oregon. So now we technically go from Atlantic Ocean to Pacific Ocean. We just don't have everything in between. Okay? So here's the Adams-Onis Treaty. You can see that this is still New Spain. But now this is what we will buy and Spain will cede. And then we also get joint occupation. The Spanish shared it with Russia and England. Now we share it with Russia and England. Okay? Now when we talk about expanding westward, there is a phrase you must know. Manifest destiny. When you think of manifest destiny, you definitely think of the 1800s, and you think of westward expansion. Okay, so an example would be Louisiana Purchase is an example of manifest destiny. Okay, how we eventually get Texas is manifest destiny. How we kick out the natives in Georgia, manifest destiny. How we get all this in the Mexican-American War, manifest destiny. And then how we eventually get some of Oregon, just without any type of joint occupation, manifest destiny. Okay? Any questions, Alyssa? Okay, awesome. So now, what I'm about to talk about is super, 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 super important, okay? It's the Monroe Doctrine. And one thing I hate is that it's like the same initials, if you will, as Manifest Destiny. People always get them confused, okay? Manifest Destiny is going west. Monroe Doctrine, it's talking about Europe. And I will say this, because of the Monroe Doctrine, we can go west, okay? So background information, y'all know that the Napoleonic Wars are over, okay? So Europe is those European countries are now focusing more on themselves than fighting other people, okay? Also though, remember we talked about Simon Bolivar, or it was in the bonus thing. There's some Latin American revolutions where people are getting free from the Spanish, okay? And even the French with the Haitian Rebellion, okay? Now that Europe has kind of regrouped, that they're not fighting the Napoleonic Wars, we are worried that Europe will now try to colonize in our neighborhood. And what is our neighborhood? The Western Hemisphere. Okay? We don't want to worry about that. And it's actually really funny, or not funny, but England, there's a guy named George Canning. England actually gives us this idea. Okay? England says, hey, John Quincy Adams, or America, we've heard rumors that other European countries, not us, but other European countries, want to go into the Western Hemisphere and start taking over. Because they lost some colonies, now they want to go back and get some more, okay? And we basically like, oh, that's a great idea, England. John Quincy Adams comes up with the Monroe Doctrine, and then in his State of the Union address, James Monroe actually announces the Monroe Doctrine, okay? And we actually say Europe, and that includes England. So think about it, like it's kind of interesting how England gave us the idea, but in the end we're like, you too, you got to follow these rules, okay? And what we say is that basically, here's what it is. Europe cannot, and like make sure you use this word, colonize. And where, guys? Where? This, not even that, or the whole neighborhood. So it would be Western Hemisphere. Because think about it. We're worried about Latin America, but if a place establishes in Latin America, it's like dominoes. They eventually could take some of us over. So we just want to say, hey, stay out of the entire Western Hemisphere, Europe, including England. If you do violate the Monroe Doctrine of 1823 and do colonize in the Western Hemisphere, what will America do? Yeah, war. Okay? The reality, though, like you would think Latin America would be like, oh, America, you're like our protector. Thank you. They were unimpressed. Remember the War of 1812 and how we were really unprepared? They were like, we're not impressed. The reality is that we probably could not enforce the Monroe Doctrine if someone violated it. We got lucky there. Okay? So there's that. And here's a cartoon. You can see, like, here's European countries. It's like, that's your hemisphere. This is our hemisphere. Back off. Don't colonize. Okay? There's another picture. Okay, I created this. Usually I draw it, but I know the people who are online wouldn't be able to really see it. So this is like my little picture of the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, there's Europe in the Eastern Hemisphere, and it's saying don't colonize anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, the first president to actually use the Monroe Doctrine was James Polk. Okay, and you don't have to know that, but you've heard Napoleon III. He sends troops to Mexico, and basically Polk's like, hey, Monroe Doctrine, you're going to fight you. He withdraws the troops. So we got lucky there, okay? A lot of presidents will use the Monroe Doctrine. Teddy Roosevelt will even add something in the 1900s called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So it is technically still in effect. If there is a European country who wants to colonize in the Western Hemisphere, we will fight you. Now think about this though. Is Europe going to back off? Yes. And because Europe backs off, we can do that whole manifest destiny and take land. Because we know Europe's not going to take the land. Okay? Let's see. And then nationalism. Think about it. This is really bold of us. Like, don't come over here or we'll fight you. The Monroe Doctrine is a product of that nationalism that grew after the War of 1812. Because, I mean, like I said, this is very bold, but we had just enough, like, confidence to issue this. And, for Monroe Doctrine, you can write something, you can draw this, but again, just make sure you know this. And, like, you cannot tell me the full story of the Monroe Doctrine if you don't have the words Europe, colonize, Western Hemisphere.
What's the first one for Monroe Doctrine?
Manifest destiny. So again, remember, the Monroe Doctrine leads to manifest destiny. Because Europe's not going to colonize, we can expand. And because Europe's not going to focus on us, we can build infrastructure and all that kind of stuff as well. Do you see another reason why his Monroe's presidency is known as the era of good feelings? Is because we don't have to worry about Europe during his presidency. They back off. Okay? And again, who wrote the Monroe Doctrine? John Quincy Adams. Okay, so let's see. Explain the Monroe Doctrine to Congress. That's part of that State of the Union address, because they go to Congress. The United States is not getting involved in any of your internal affairs. So what that means is, like, don't get involved in ours. Okay? And then let's colonize this land. Not so fast. This land's in the Western Hemisphere. Like that. There, another person did that. Okay. So don't worry about this yet. I want to go over a couple of things. Okay. SAQ. You have one SAQ in your test tomorrow. Okay. I want to go over just a couple of quick examples because I think some of us still aren't getting it. Okay. And this is like y'all's work. Okay. Remember, read all parts of the SAQ before you even start typing. Why? Because you cannot double dip. If you talk about something in part A, you can't talk about it in part B. Okay? And then don't fake it, meaning give me specifics. Like use the word such as to help you out. Okay? And just make sure you answer the question. If it only asks for one thing, just give me one thing. Okay? And remember, you identify the evidence, you define the evidence, you explain how the evidence answers your question, and then you have the answer. So remember, this is that one that was like identify one factor that increased tension between Great Britain and North American colonies during that period and how it led to the American Revolution. So it's two parts. You actually have to identify something, explain how it led to tension, but also explain how it led to the American Revolution. Okay? You see, I made this, like I put things in yellow. This was an SAQ in 2016. Okay? So sample one, like I said, I know it's small kind of stuff, but do you see how sample one, just by looking at this, I see some such as, and like I see examples. So Proclamation of 1773, okay? I see like, even though this person didn't talk about standing army, but they talk about army during peacetime. They talk about quartering act, okay? And then taxation and boycotting, okay? And then the whole taxation about representation. You see, I have some specifics already, okay? But what if, well, just note, so already they have some examples, okay? They've identified it. They also have to explain how it led to the American Revolution, okay? So you see, this is a great introductory sentence. When King George III made the Proclamation of 1773, it increased tensions between the British and colonists. Great introductory sentence. And then let's define it. The proclamation didn't allow colonists to settle West Appalachian Mountains. That's the definition, okay? And then the colonists felt this was unfair because they felt crowded in the colonies and the king didn't let them expand. Yes?
Are you going to return our past test first to see what we did wrong?
I can. It depends on if everyone has taken it. So I'll have to check. Okay? I think there was one person in the second block, like this, like, test, 3 quizzes. He just withdrew, so chances are I can return it. Okay? All right. But you see, that's a good example. Okay? Right here, Stamp Act. So good. Introduce the Stamp Act. Defined it. Taxes on paper documents. And then also, the person pointed out, also paid the tax was the revenue for the salaries of the, the redcoats, the standing army. And then this person actually explained that it was the whole no taxation on representation that's what led to the American Revolution. Okay? Now with here, the key word is distinct. So this has to be something completely different here. So you cannot talk about no taxation on representation here, because it has to be distinct, okay? So this is talking about the intolerable acts, okay? And talking about how that really hurt people, okay? And like because there was less trading. So this like talking about how it economically hurt people, okay? This one talked about the Gatsby and explained what happened, okay? And talked about how they were sent to England in outrage. So these are 3 distinct things. Some people have said like, here's a tax, here's a tax, here's a tax, That doesn't work. If you're explaining the tax is what made people mad, you have to say like the fact that they had no representation with this tax is what made them mad. The fact that the Tea Act, you know, gave them a monopoly and it led to the Boston Tea Party, and like that would lead to tension. That's another distinct thing. Okay. Okay, look at this one right here. Taxes were a large contributing factor to increasing tensions in the American and the British. And they said they had no representation in government and not consent to the extra taxes. This part is good right here. But what makes this not that great? Yeah, they don't have a such as. If they had just put like taxes such as the Stamp Act, and then be like the Stamp Act, put a tax on paper documents, whatever. Perfect. Don't fake it. If you don't give me a specific, I assume you're faking it. Okay? So this is about new soldiers and like British soldiers marching to the streets. Okay? The Confederates made a threat to their autonomy. Why? Because it was during peacetime or something like that. I needed more here, the explanation part. Okay? About the Boston Massacre. Okay? And also how they also shut down, there's like intolerable acts too. This response is more leaving, okay, did you explain why though? So in that last sentence, I would use the word because it forces you to give me a better explanation. Okay, so again, that first sentence, you just identify, make sure you get thrown in such as or something. Okay, then define that such as. And then that last sentence, I would use the word because it forces you to answer the question instead of just saying, oh, it led to tension or it led to the American Revolution. Because, okay? This person didn't have a C, but these were still good, so they earned 2 out of 3 points. Okay? I'd rather you skip one than like get so frustrated about one of those letters that like it's crap for the other 2. Does that make sense? Because 2 is better than 0. Again, such as, we got that there. Talking about the redcoat salary, olive branch petition. They aren't faking it. That's the first thing I do when I read your SAQs. Are you faking it or do you have specifics? Okay. Sugar Act, Tea Act, Sons of Liberty, New Quartering Act, Intolerable Acts. Okay. Stamp Act. And then like ending sanitary neglect. So like this is like the tax that makes someone mad. This is talking about how like they were used to doing their own thing and now sanitary neglect's over, and that's another reason for the American Revolution. And then this one is like the whole self-government thing. Is the whole that kind of thing. Okay. So I hope this helps you. Okay. So what we'll do now, I want you to take 10 minutes and work on that sectionalism, nationalism thing. Okay? And then we'll do Jim Kit quizzes stuff. Okay, but we are finished with content. Yes?
The U.S. gave right to Texas. They gave up Oregon?
Yeah. But you'll see, we'll get Texas. We'll find a way to get Texas. Guys, what I'll do about the test, I'm pretty sure I can post it around 4:30 today. If you want to look to see like how much you got. And honestly, what I would do is look to see how much you got on your SAQs and your essay. Okay? To see like what was enough or not enough. I will post at 4:30 p.m. because I think everyone will have made it